here's a little sneak peek for you of what we get up to in today's episode. So how you guys doing, man? You doing alright? I hope you are. I have got an awesome episode for you today. We needed to put some form of a power station or something of the like in the city, and I thought, well, what can I do that's a little bit different that might not have been done before? And a watermill came to me, and I thought, well, yeah, I could make that work. There's cube services that I can make it actually generate power, and boom, here we are. I've run straight off that little vision. So in this episode, ladies and gentlemen, indeed we are building a watermill. And even though in future I am going to build a few more of these down in the town on the sides of buildings and little canals and stuff like that, I've decided this first one here is going to be up here in a little natural sort of a spring or a stream that's running about halfway down the hill behind the city. And it's just made to look like it runs away under some rocks and back in and under the ground level. So I spend a bit of time here putting some waterfalls in and some rocks and things like that, and just making this a really sort of a nice natural looking scene. And I don't know how realistic it is just having a little stream pop up out of nowhere and then disappear, but it suits my narrative, so I'm rolling with it. And while we're on the topic of realism, I guess it's probably not that realistic either to just have this water wheel up here powering this whole little village, but I think it looks really good, man, and I'm gonna make it work just because of that. But also I'll look to add more sources of power later on, of course. If the city starts to get large, which I think it may, then eventually we'll have power sources to suit. So I've seen your guys' reaction now. I've seen the reaction to episode 1, and it's been pretty good. It's been really positive, and I'm stoked that you guys are excited about this series. I'm trying to offer something different. There's been a lot of really good, and there still is a lot of good European series out there. I watched the likes of Nidal with Strict Toaster, and there's Altengrad as well. There's so many good European series out there. Not to mention what Titan's doing. He's probably my favourite. He's really, really good. So all of those guys are European, so that, making these types of cities might sort of come naturally to them, although, definitely came across that way. And I'm just a humble Kiwi doing the best I can. And I feel like detailing is probably my strong point. I'm no city planner, I'll be the first to admit that. But if you need a few decals and some planners chucked around, then I am your man. So I guess I should start talking about what it is I'm actually building here. I chucked this big concrete block down here so that I've got something square to work off, and start using these wood piles again and make a little sort of a boardwalk or a wooden walkway coming into the watermill. And you guys know how much I love this wooden pile. I've used it heaps, and I use it again here. Scale it down a little bit, but this gives us the basic outline of where we're going to have the boardwalk, and we'll have some stairs running up to this eventually as well. And I want to mention as well that there's been a couple of comments that I read from the first episode that are really awesome, like suggestions on what to build and what cities to look at and stuff like that. And I really appreciate that, because the two that I was given, I went and had a look at them, and they are really quality suggestions, so I really appreciate that. And please guys, keep those suggestions coming in. If there's anybody that's watching that creates assets and stuff like that might be interested in doing some works for this little village and little city of mine here, please, give me a message. If you're friends with me on Twitter, give me a DM or chuck a comment down here. I'd like to hear from you. I'm happy to commission anyone who wants to make anything for me. I'm interested in a little sign. Maybe we could name the city and we could make some little signs or something like that, or maybe there's some, something that you could come up with that could be appropriate for this build. I was lucky enough to already have someone very short notice make the water wheel for me, and we'll go into that a bit later on. But anyway, here you can see we've finally finished the boardwalk, and I put some old stone stairs in here, and then we make a cool little wee path that sort of zigzags its way up the hill here. I did want to put like a cube service or something at the top of the path here up where the watermill is, but because there's no road access, it just ends up getting a whole lot of notification problems and ends up being abandoned, so I've just left it as a visual for now. So as the paths come into where we've had the edge of the village, I've decided to do a little bit of detailing and put a few buildings around here while we're at it. And I want the edge of the village here to open out a little bit as it meets this path, so the buildings become a little bit less compact and the detailing also becomes a little bit more simplistic. And just for the sake of variety, I add this little sort of a boardwalk into the other side of the street. And I just love this stone wall. I think it's by Armesto. When you PO it and squeeze it down, the texture becomes even better, and it's got this sort of an aged, sort of a slimy look off the top of it, and it just goes so well with the theme here. And you'll see me start to add in some medieval type buildings here as well, and we'll go into why a little bit later on. So you'll see the detailing start to transition here out into grass and to more nature type detailing. So in hindsight, it was pretty naive of me to just start this build without actually seeing if there was any water wheels on the workshop. I was pretty sure that I could make something work, and you'll see me here try a few different things that just ultimately did not work whatsoever. Sven Berlin has a watermill on the workshop, and you see me use it here, and the water wheel was spinning the wrong way. I'm not sure why. I've seen cinematics where this works for other people, so yeah, I don't know what the bloody hell's going on here. So at this point I thought, bugger it, anything that I can get to work could potentially be used, and I wanted to animate it. That was the whole part of the vision. I could make it turn, I could animate it, so that had to happen. I couldn't get anything to work, and in the end I contacted Revi, my good old mate who helped me in the New Zealand series, and he made this amazing water wheel for me in literally hours. Man, I was so excited. I bowled straight back in the game and deleted that old dirty one that I made and put his in, and wow, look at this. I even asked him to make it so that I could animate it, so he's put the center of it right in the center of the wheel so that when I add a turning module, it turns perfectly in the middle. So because I got that quite late in the build, you will see my old crappy wheel in the back of this shot here. And I was so proud of myself when I made this thing, but looking back at this now, oh my word, thank you Revi is all I can say. So obviously this wasn't built when this village was very first put together, which could have been 1,000 years ago. This has obviously been added later on, but I still wanted to go with the oldest form of power, or the oldest that I could think of anyway in the city, and I think that's only fitting. I mean, I'm not going to go chucking a nuclear plant in here, for instance. But at the same time, I wanted to try and do something that I thought had never been done before, or at least I hadn't seen anything being done like this before. And I'll admit, it's very intimidating starting a European series after the likes of the creators I mentioned earlier. They've nailed everything. They've given me a lot of inspiration to do this, and more specifically to do things that they may not have done, because I guess that's my way of getting off the hook and getting a non-comparison directly to them. But honestly, who wants to watch the same thing over and over again? We want variety, right? I mean, who knows, maybe you guys could take some inspiration from this as well. I hope you can anyway. So here's where I swap over to the water wheel that Revi's made for me, and straight away, yeah, you can see how much better this is. It's absolutely gorgeous and easy to work with, and yes, you would see me install it backwards here to start with, but I do flip it around eventually. And then I just go ahead and use a few stone and wood assets to sort of sit it in place and make it look like it's been held up by something. And the crown jewel of this is the fact that he's put the center point right in the middle, and it makes it easy for me to animate it with the modules, and this looks absolutely gorgeous when it's spinning around later on. I just can't get enough of watching it. And while we're installing this, we also install a water feed as well, and I've made it look like it's old and broken and barely hanging in there, but it's still doing the job. And while I'm putting this together, let's have a quick look at some of the pictures I use for inspiration for this area. And you can see here exactly what I've gone for. I mean, just how good looking is that? I mean, that is absolute natural beauty at its finest as far as I'm concerned. And I've tried to stick true to this. I hope you guys can see that. We're lucky enough to have awesome assets like the likes of these waterfalls from Kaminogi on the workshop here that have just helped. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this without these waterfall assets. That's how vital they are. Needless to say, this is probably about as far away from the base game as you could potentially get. But it's really only because there's all these mods and assets that allow us to be able to do this. And to be honest, it makes for a more interesting episode than just putting down a coal plant, doesn't it? So guys, I still need your comments and inspiration on where we're going to take this city. Do we make it a bit larger and include really detailed intersections and things like that, or do we keep it a little wee village that's highly detailed? I really need to know which way you guys want me to go with this. I know for sure that there's going to be at least one area that will sort of flatten out and go into a more traditional style of building, but I guess without making the call early that we're going to make a large city, it's going to be without the likes of a good train network. It might not have any trams or anything like that. So I guess the earlier we make that call, the better. So let's make that call together, guys. Come on, what should we do? Should we try and blow my computer up? Let's get 150,000 people in this tiny little village with like 60,000 props and just try and set fire to my house. Nah, let's not do that. But yeah, I don't know. What way should we go? So here's the part that really makes this worthwhile. I put the electricity cube services in here, a couple of these buildings, and then run some fake power lines down into the town. And admittedly, the power lines are completely fake. They're all made with PO. But this is close enough to the town that the power connects naturally through the game physics, and the power lines are just purely there for show. But they are running down to the very core of the city, and we dive into that in the next episode, and it is really cool. So I've tried to make it all make sense. This is connecting to the most important part of the city, or it was back then at least, and I've built it close enough to the city where we can properly admire its beauty. I didn't want to build it too far away. I was very close to doing that, but I wanted it as close to the city as possible because I knew how beautiful it would be. So a little bit of juggling around here with various props and some wires and very tedious stuff. We ended up with some pretty cool looking power lines, and I've made a few of them on an angle and not quite right and square, and tried to make them look aged and weathered. And I think in the end, the fact that it ended up being so close to the town is probably a realistic thing, because back then resources were low, manpower may have been low, labour would have been very hard and meticulous, and building it close to the village makes a lot of sense. I was hoping to get a little bit more built in that episode, but I also didn't want to skimp on the footage that I had for the Watermill. And as it turns out, I had enough footage from just the Watermill to make a whole episode, and I'm really stoked with how this has come out. I couldn't really think of anything else that was more appropriate in the city to provide power than something like this. If you guys can think of anything, I would love to hear it in the comments, because there's still room and time to add something else in. So I want to thank you guys for watching this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I got some really nice shots here of what we've built in this episode. If you guys don't subscribe to me, you should definitely consider doing that, because I've got massive plans for this series. If you're enjoying it, subscribe and hit that bell. I got heaps more. For those legends that have already done that, I really appreciate your support, and thank you so much for watching my content. Have a great weekend, guys, and I will see you later.